The dust hadn't settled from the morning's cattle drive when Clara Carter found herself standing in her sister's wedding dress, the ivory silk feeling like borrowed skin against her frame. Outside the modest farmhouse, Dust Creek sprawled beneath the merciless August sun, a collection of weathered buildings that passed for civilization in this forgotten corner of the West. "Hold still, Clara!" Evelyn commanded, pins between her teeth as she adjusted the hem. "I need to see how it falls." Clara's fingers traced the delicate lace at her throat, feeling like an imposter in the finest garment their family had ever owned. The dress had cost more than their farm produced in 6 months, paid for by Thomas Whitmore, the man who would claim Evelyn as his bride in 3 days' time. "It's too fine for Dust Creek," Clara murmured, catching her reflection in the cracked mirror propped against the wall. The young woman staring back looked nothing like herself, transformed by silk and circumstance into someone who might belong in the grand houses back east. Evelyn's laugh held no humor. "Nothing's too fine when you're marrying the richest man in 3 counties. She stood, brushing dust from her work dress, a stark contrast to the wedding gown. "Besides, it's not about Dust Creek. It's about saving what's left of our family." The weight of those words hung between them like the oppressive heat. Their father's debts had mounted since his death 2 winters past, and Thomas Whitmore had offered salvation wrapped in a marriage contract. Evelyn, beautiful and practical at 23, had accepted her fate with the same determination she'd shown when their mother died birthing Clara. "Try on the veil," Evelyn instructed, producing the delicate piece from its tissue wrapping. "I want everything perfect for the ceremony." Clara lifted the gossamer fabric, watching how it caught the light filtering through the dusty window. As she placed it over her honey-colored hair, the world softened behind its gentle barrier. For a moment, she could pretend she was the bride, not destined for a loveless match, but choosing her own path. The door banged open without warning, startling both women. Clara spun toward the sound, the veil billowing around her like morning mist. James McGraw stood in the doorway, his broad shoulders blocking the harsh sunlight. Dust clung to his worn leather chaps, and his hat shadowed features carved sharp by sun and hardship. He'd been working their horses for near a month now, a drifter who'd proven too skilled with animals for even their meager farm to refuse. "Pardon, ma'am," he began, addressing what he assumed was Evelyn beneath the veil. "Your foreman sent me to—" He stopped mid-sentence. Clara watched his expression change, those gray eyes narrowing with an intensity that made her breath catch. The silence stretched taut as a bowstring while he studied her through the veil, his gaze traveling from her trembling hands to the way the dress clung unfamiliarly to her smaller frame. Then something shifted in his face, a recognition that went deeper than mere observation. One corner of his mouth lifted in the ghost of a smile, and Clara knew with mortifying certainty that he'd seen through her disguise as surely as if the veil didn't exist. He'd undressed the pretense with that single, penetrating look, leaving her exposed as the younger sister playing dress-up in borrowed finery. "Miss Clara," he said quietly, deliberately using her name rather than her sister's. The way he drew out the syllables made something flutter in her stomach. "Didn't expect to find you here." Evelyn stepped forward, her voice sharp. "Mr. McGraw, you should knock before entering a lady's chamber." "My apologies," James replied, but his eyes never left Clara. "Though I'd argue this is more of a kitchen than a chamber, Miss Evelyn." He was right. They'd been using the kitchen for the fitting, its large table cleared for the purpose. But the observation only heightened Clara's awareness of how close the quarters were, how she could smell the leather and horse and something uniquely male that clung to him. "What do you want?" Evelyn demanded, moving protectively closer to Clara. James finally shifted his attention to the elder sister. "Water pump's broken at the stable. Horses need tending, and I'll need permission to use the house well." "Of course," Evelyn said curtly. "Now, if you'll excuse us—" "Actually," James interrupted, his gaze sliding back to Clara. "Might I have a word with Miss Clara about her mare?" She's been favoring her left foreleg. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. Buttercup hadn't shown any sign of lameness that morning, before Evelyn could refuse. Clara heard herself speaking. "I'll be just a moment," she said, her voice muffled by the veil. Evelyn's disapproval radiated like heat from a stove, but she couldn't reasonably refuse such a practical request. "5 minutes," she warned. "And Clara, remove that veil. You'll soil it." With trembling fingers, Clara lifted the delicate fabric from her head, feeling oddly naked without its protection. James watched the unveiling with an expression she couldn't decipher, something hungry and patient all at once. She followed him onto the porch, still wearing the wedding dress that whispered with each step. The afternoon sun struck her like a physical blow after the dim kitchen. "Buttercup's leg," she prompted when he said nothing. James leaned against the porch rail, studying her with those unsettling gray eyes. "Sound as the day she was born," he admitted without shame. "But you looked like you needed rescuing." Heat flooded Clara's cheeks. "From my own sister." "From that dress." His voice dropped lower. "Meant only for her. Doesn't suit you." The words stung more than they should have. "Because I'm not pretty enough, not refined enough for silk. Because you're not meant for cages. Clara Carter." The way he said her full name sent shivers down her spine despite the heat. "That dress is a beautiful cage, but a cage all the same." Clara's hands fisted in the expensive fabric. "You don't know anything about what I'm meant for." "Don't I?" James pushed off from the rail, closing the distance between them until she could see the gold flecks in his gray eyes. "I've watched you with the horses. Seen you race that mare across the plains when you think no one's looking. You're wild as the mustangs we break. And that dress," he gestured at the confection of silk and lace, "that dress is meant to break you instead." "It's not my dress," Clara whispered, hating how her voice trembled. "It's Evelyn's. I was just helping." "I know." The simple acknowledgement held more understanding than she'd expected. "Soon as I saw you in it, I knew. You wear it like armor you're not comfortable in. Your sister, now, she'd wear it like a queen wears a crown." Clara searched his face, finding only honesty in those weathered features. "How did you know when you first looked?" James was quiet for a long moment, his gaze traveling over her face with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "Because when I looked at you in that veil, all I could see was you trying to disappear." "But Clara," he reached out, his calloused thumb barely grazing her cheek. "You're not the kind of woman who disappears. You burn too bright for that." The touch lasted only a heartbeat before he pulled back, but Clara felt marked by it. Branded. Mr. McGraw. "James," he corrected. "Just James." "James." The name felt dangerous on her tongue. "You shouldn't say such things." "Probably not." He didn't look remotely repentant. "But I'm not much for shouldn'ts. Comes from living outside polite society too long." Clara knew she should go back inside, back to the safety of her sister's watchful eye and the life mapped out in ledger lines and marriage contracts. But something kept her rooted to the spot, caught in the web of this man's attention. "Where did you come from?" she asked impulsively. "Before Dust Creek." A shadow crossed his features. "Lots of places, nowhere that matters now." "The war." "Among other things." His smile held edges sharp enough to cut. "But that's not a story for sunny afternoons and pretty girls in wedding dresses." "I told you, it's not my dress." "No," James agreed, his voice soft as smoke. "But maybe someday you'll wear one that is one you choose. One that fits who you really are instead of who others need you to be." The sound of Evelyn clearing her throat made them both turn. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed, disapproval etched in every line of her body. "Your 5 minutes are up," she announced coldly. "Mr. McGraw, I trust you can see to the horses without further consultation." "Yes, ma'am." James touched the brim of his hat, but his eyes found Clara's one last time. Miss Clara. He strode away, spurs ringing against the wooden boards. Clara watched until he disappeared around the corner of the house, her skin still tingling where he'd touched her. Inside, Evelyn commanded, now. Clara obeyed, but her thoughts remained outside, following a tall man with gray eyes who'd seen through her veil as easily as looking through water. As Evelyn helped her out of the wedding dress, her sister's hands were less gentle than before. Stay away from him, Clara. He works for us. He's a drifter, a man without roots or reputation. Evelyn hung the dress carefully, smoothing imaginary wrinkles. You're 19 years old. Sister, old enough to know that men like James McGraw bring nothing but trouble. Clara pulled on her everyday calico, the familiar fabric a relief after the constraining silk. And men like Thomas Whitmore, what do they bring? Evelyn's face hardened. Security, respectability, a future for this family. But not love. Love? Evelyn laughed bitterly. Love doesn't pay debts or put food on the table. Love doesn't keep the bank from taking our land. Clara wanted to argue, but the defeat in her sister's eyes stopped her. Evelyn had been carrying their family since she was barely older than Clara was now. Who was Clara to question her sacrifices? But as she went about her afternoon chores, Clara couldn't forget the feeling of James McGraw's eyes on her, seeing past every defense to the wild heart beneath. She'd hidden behind her sister's veil, but he'd undressed her pretense with one look, leaving her more exposed than she'd ever been. And despite the danger, despite Evelyn's warnings, despite everything, Clara found herself hoping it wouldn't be the last time. The morning after the wedding dress incident, Clara woke before dawn, her dreams still tangled with gray eyes and dangerous smiles. She dressed quietly in the darkness, pulling on her worn riding skirt and boots, determined to avoid any chance encounters. But as she stepped onto the porch, the smell of coffee and tobacco smoke told her she was already too late. James sat on the top step, a steaming cup cradled in his hands. He didn't turn at her approach, but she saw his shoulders tense slightly, aware of her presence. Early riser, he observed, his voice rough with mourning. The horses need tending, Clara replied stiffly, trying to edge past him. Already done. He took a slow sip of coffee. Couldn't sleep. Figured I'd make myself useful. Clara hesitated, torn between escape and the treacherous pull of his company. Buttercup. Sound as I promised, though she misses your morning rides. Now he did turn, looking up at her with those unsettling eyes. Been 3 days since you took her out. Heat crept up Clara's neck. She had been avoiding the stables, avoiding him. I've been busy, the wedding preparations. The wedding you're not having. His tone was mild, but the words cut deep. My sister's happiness is my concern too. Clara shot back. Is it happiness? James stood, unfolding his long frame with lazy grace. Or is it duty dressed up in white silk? You don't know anything about it. I know enough. He stepped closer, and Clara caught that scent again, leather and horse and something wild. I know Thomas Whitmore's reputation. Know he buried his first wife not 2 years past, and there's talk about how she died. Clara's breath caught. What talk? James's jaw tightened. The kind decent folks don't repeat, but your sister might want to ask why none of his household staff stayed on after Mrs. Whitmore passed. You're trying to frighten me. I'm trying to warn you. His hand reached out as if to touch her, then fell back. Both of you. But I suspect your sister wouldn't listen even if I told her straight. Clara knew he was right. Evelyn had made her choice with eyes wide open, accepting whatever came with it. She's saving our family. By sacrificing herself. It's what she does, Clara whispered. It's what she's always done. Since Mother died, since Father... She stopped, unwilling to share their family's wounds with this near stranger. But James seemed to understand anyway. His expression softened. How old were you when your mother passed? Minutes. The word came out harsher than intended. I was minutes old. She lived long enough to name me. Then, Clara shrugged, a gesture meant to show indifference to a pain she'd carried all her life. That's a heavy burden for a child to bear. Evelyn says it's not my fault. But you don't believe her. It wasn't a question. Clara turned away, unable to bear the compassion in his eyes. I should go. There's work. I've been thinking about what you said. James's words stopped her retreat. About my past not mattering. You were wrong. Despite herself, Clara faced him again. Oh. It matters because it made me who I am. Just like your past shaped you. He set down his coffee cup, his movements deliberate. I was at Antietam, saw things that would turn your stomach, did things that still wake me at night. When the war ended, I couldn't go home, couldn't pretend to be the man I was before. Clara found herself moving closer, drawn by the raw honesty in his voice. So you drift. So I drift, he agreed. Taking work where I can find it, trying to, I don't know, make amends, maybe, or just survive. And Dust Creek, what brought you here? A wry smile touched his lips. Your horses, word travels among working men. The Carter place had good stock but hard times. Figured you could use skilled hands. That's all? His eyes found hers, holding them with an intensity that made her pulse race. That was all. Until I saw you that first morning, racing Buttercup across the dawn plains like you were trying to outrun the sunrise itself. Clara's breath stuttered. You saw that? Couldn't look away. His voice dropped to that dangerous register again. You rode like you were part of the horse, wild and free and utterly alive. And I thought... He paused, seeming to weigh his words. I thought I'd never seen anything so beautiful. The air between them crackled with tension. Clara knew she should run, should put distance between herself and this man who saw too much, who made her feel too much, but her feet remained rooted. You shouldn't say such things, she managed. We covered this yesterday. I'm not much for shouldn'ts. But there was a rueful note in his voice now. Though maybe you're right. You're not for the likes of me. Clara Carter, you deserve better than a broken-down soldier with blood on his hands. Don't. The word came out fiercer than intended. Don't you dare decide what I deserve. James's eyes widened slightly at her vehemence. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled, a real smile that transformed his weathered features. There she is, the woman who races the sunrise. Before Clara could respond, the kitchen door banged open. Evelyn emerged, her face tight with disapproval. Clara, inside, now! Her tone brooked no argument. Clara wanted to rebel, to claim her right to speak with whomever she chose, but the exhaustion in her sister's eyes stopped her. Evelyn was fighting battles on all fronts, trying to hold their world together. The least Clara could do was not add to her burdens. Good morning, Miss Evelyn, James said politely. Evelyn ignored him entirely. Clara, I won't ask again. With a last glance at James, Clara followed her sister inside, but she felt his eyes on her back, a warm weight that lingered even after the door closed between them. The days that followed fell into a pattern of careful avoidance. Clara threw herself into wedding preparations, helping Evelyn with everything from menu planning to flower arrangements. But she couldn't escape James's presence entirely. He was always there at the edges of her vision-mending fences, training horses, his quiet competence a constant reminder of their dawn conversation. Thomas Whitmore visited twice, a heavy-set man with cold eyes and soft hands that had never known real work. He treated Evelyn like a prize he'd already won, speaking of their future with a possessiveness that made Clara's skin crawl. When he looked at Clara, his gaze lingered too long, assessing her like livestock at market. Your sister will bloom nicely in a few years, he told Evelyn during one visit, not bothering to lower his voice. Perhaps we'll find her a suitable match among my business associates. Clara had to leave the room to keep from speaking her mind. She found herself at the stables, seeking comfort in Buttercup's uncomplicated affection.
He's already planning to sell you off too.
She spun to find James watching from the shadows, his expression dark. Were you eavesdropping? Hard not to hear when he speaks like he owns the whole county. James stepped into the light, and Clara saw the tension coiled in his frame. Which I suppose he nearly does. It's none of your concern. Isn't it? He moved closer, and Clara's heart began its familiar race. Tell me something, Clara. What do you want? Not what your sister needs, not what your family requires. What do you want? The question hung between them, dangerous as loaded dice. Clara had never been asked that before. Her whole life had been shaped by others' needs, others' expectations. She faltered, then found her courage. I want to ride Buttercup to the horizon and keep going. I want to see what's beyond Dust Creek, beyond the plains. I want to choose my own path instead of following the one laid out for me. Then why don't you? Because I'm not a man, Clara said bitterly. I can't just saddle a horse and disappear into the sunset. Women who do that end up nowhere good. James was quiet for a moment. Then, there are other ways to be free. Like what, marriage? Clara laughed, but there was no humor in it. Trading one cage for another. Not all marriages are cages. His voice was carefully neutral. Some are partnerships. Two people choosing to face the world together. Clara's breath caught at the implication in his words. James! I know, he said quickly. I know all the reasons it's impossible, but knowing doesn't stop a man from dreaming. The barn suddenly felt too small, the air too thick. Clara could hear her heart pounding, could feel every inch of space between them like a physical ache. I should go, she whispered. Should you? That challenge again, that gentle push against the boundaries she'd accepted all her life. Clara met his eyes, saw her own longing reflected there, and for one wild moment almost gave in to the pull between them. Then she heard Evelyn calling from the house, voice sharp with worry, and reality crashed back. Clara stepped away, putting necessary distance between them. Yes, she said firmly, I should. But as she walked back to the house, she could feel something fundamental shifting inside her. James McGraw had planted a seed of possibility, of choice, that grew stronger with each passing hour. The question was whether she'd have the courage to let it bloom, or whether duty would strangle it before it could take root. The wedding was in 2 days. 2 days to decide whether she'd watch her sister disappear into a loveless marriage while she herself remained trapped in Dust Creek's dusty embrace. 2 days to choose between safety and the wild freedom she'd tasted in James's words, in his eyes, in the dangerous space between what was expected and what was possible. Clara pressed her hand to her chest, feeling the rapid beat of her heart, and wondered if this was what it felt like to wake up. Painful and exhilarating and absolutely terrifying. The moon hung fat and silver over Dust Creek, casting long shadows across the parched earth. Clara couldn't sleep. Tomorrow, Evelyn would become Mrs. Thomas Whitmore, and their lives would change forever. The thought sat like lead in her stomach, driving her from her bed and out into the cooling night air. She walked without conscious direction, her feet finding the familiar path to the creek that gave their town its name. The water ran low this time of year, barely a trickle over smooth stones, but the cottonwoods along its banks provided shelter from prying eyes. Clara had been sitting on a fallen log for perhaps 10 minutes when she heard it, the splash of water and a low, pained hiss. Her body tensed, ready to flee, but curiosity won out. She crept forward, using the trees as cover, until she could see the source of the sound. James stood knee-deep in the creek, his shirt discarded on the bank. Moonlight played across his back, highlighting not just the lean muscles but a network of scars that made Clara's breath catch. Some were old, white lines against his sun-darkened skin. Others looked fresher, including a jagged wound along his ribs that seeped blood into the water. He was washing the wound with careful movements, occasionally pausing to grip the nearby tree branch when pain overtook him. Clara watched, frozen by the raw intimacy of the moment. This was James stripped of all pretense, not the confident drifter or the careful hired hand, but a man bearing the physical proof of a violent life. A twig snapped under her foot. James spun, his hand going to where a gun would sit, then relaxing fractionally when he saw her. "Clara," her name was rough on his lips. "You shouldn't be here." "Neither should you," she countered, stepping into the moonlight. "That wound needs proper tending." "I've had worse." "That's not reassuring." She moved closer, her healer's instincts overriding propriety. "What happened?" James turned back to the water, continuing his ministrations. "Disagreement in town. Some of Whitmore's men took exception to my presence." "Because you work for us." "Because I was asking questions about their boss." He glanced at her over his shoulder. "Questions about his first wife." Clara's heart clenched. "James, you can't—" "Can't what? Can't care what happens to your sister." He faced her fully now, and the intensity in his eyes made her step back. "Can't stand by while she walks into God knows what." "It's not your fight, isn't it?" He waded toward the bank, water streaming from his trousers. "When does it become my fight? Clara, when he hurts her, when he turns his attention to you." The thought of Thomas Whitmore's cold eyes and grasping hands made Clara shudder. James saw it, his expression darkening further. "He's already noticed you," he said quietly. "I've seen how he watches when you serve dinner, like a wolf eyeing the lamb it'll take next season." "Stop!" Clara wrapped her arms around herself. "Just stop. Tomorrow Evelyn marries him, and that's the end of it. We'll pay our debts, keep our land, and survive. That's what we do. We survive." "Is that all you want, survival?" The question hung between them like morning mist. Clara thought of all the dreams she'd pushed down, all the wants she'd buried beneath duty and necessity. "Sometimes survival is enough," she whispered. "No." James stepped onto the bank, close enough that she could see the water droplets clinging to his skin. "No, it's not. I've spent 5 years just surviving. Clara, moving from place to place, working for whoever would hire a man with ghosts in his eyes. And then I came here, saw you racing that mare like your soul depended on it, and I remembered what it felt like to want something more." Clara's breath quickened. "James, I know I've got no right." His voice was fierce now, urgent. "I'm nobody, a drifter with scarred hands and too many debts to the dead. But I look at you, and I see everything I thought the war had killed in me. Hope, beauty, the possibility of something good and clean and true." He reached out, his wet fingers barely grazing her cheek. "Tell me you don't feel it too. Tell me I'm alone in this madness. And I'll leave tonight. Take my pay and ride out before the wedding. You'll never see me again." Clara closed her eyes, leaning into his touch despite herself. The rational part of her screamed warnings about duty, about Evelyn, about the impossibility of it all. But the wild heart that James had recognized, the part that raced horses and dreamed of horizons, spoke louder. "I can't," she breathed. "I can't tell you that." His hand cupped her face fully now, thumb stroking her cheekbone with infinite gentleness. "Clara, look at me." She opened her eyes to find him studying her with an expression that made her knees weak. Hunger and tenderness warred in his gaze, but it was the hope that undid her, fragile and fierce all at once. "You're not alone," she admitted, the words torn from some deep place. "God help me, you're not alone in this." Something shifted in his face, a wall crumbling. He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away, to choose safety over this moment. But Clara had been safe all her life, and it had brought her nothing but a cage made of others' expectations. Their lips met soft as moonlight on water. Clara had never been kissed before, had imagined it would be awkward or disappointing, but James kissed like he did everything else, with quiet competence and surprising gentleness. His lips were warm despite the creek water, moving against hers with careful exploration. Clara's hands found his shoulders, feeling the solid reality of him. This was happening. She was standing by Dust Creek, kissing a man who wasn't her husband, who would never be her husband, while her sister prepared to marry for money. The thought of Evelyn made her pull back, guilt crashing over her like cold water. I can't do this to her. James didn't pursue her, but neither did he let go entirely. His hands settled on her waist, holding her gently in place. What about what's being done to you? That's different. Is it? His eyes searched hers. She's choosing her cage. Clara, are you going to let her choose yours too? She's my sister. She raised me, sacrificed for me. And now she's sacrificing herself for you. When does it end? James's voice held no judgment, only genuine curiosity. When do you get to live for yourself instead of for everyone else's needs? Clara had no answer. She'd never thought that far ahead, never imagined a life beyond duty and debt. I should go, she said, but made no move to leave his embrace. Probably. His hands tightened slightly on her waist. But not yet. Give me this moment. Clara, tomorrow your sister marries, and everything changes. But tonight you're just Clara, and I'm just James, and the moon doesn't care about propriety or promises. She should have protested, should have run back to the safety of her narrow bed and her narrower life. Instead, Clara found herself settling against his chest, her ear pressed to his heart. He was still shirtless, and she could feel the raised lines of scars beneath her palms, each one a story of survival. Tell me about the war, she said quietly. Tell me what made these marks. James was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of memory. This one. He guided her hand to a puckered scar near his shoulder. Sharpshooter at Chancellorsville. Thought I was done for, but the field surgeon was too busy with worse cases to let me die. His fingers moved hers to another mark. Bayonet at Gettysburg. Man wasn't much older than you. We looked each other in the eyes as he pushed it in, both of us knowing it could have gone either way. And this? Clara traced the fresh wound on his ribs. Whitmore's man had a knife. Didn't expect me to know how to fight dirty. A harsh laugh. Lot of things they don't expect from a simple horse trainer. You're not simple. Clara pulled back to look at him. Nothing about you is simple. Neither are you. He touched her face again. Wonder in his expression. Do you know what you look like in the moonlight? Like something out of a dream I'm afraid I'll wake from. I'm real. She covered his hand with hers. This is real. Is it? His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Because tomorrow? Tomorrow doesn't exist. Clara interrupted fiercely. Not right now. Right now there's only this creek, this moon, this moment. James studied her for a long heartbeat, then pulled her close again. This kiss was different, deeper, edged with desperation. Clara responded instinctively, her body recognizing what her mind had always known she belonged here, in this man's arms, more than she'd ever belonged in her proper life. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, James rested his forehead against hers. Run away with me. The words hung in the air like stars, beautiful and impossibly distant. What? After the wedding, when things settle, I'll take you anywhere you want to go. His voice gained strength with each word. California, Oregon. Hell, we could go to South America if you wanted. Somewhere nobody knows us. Where you can be whoever you want to be. Clara's heart raced at the possibility. To leave Dust Creek. To see the world beyond these plains. To choose her own path. I can't leave Evelyn. She's leaving you? The words were gentle but implacable. She's choosing Whitmore's money over everything else. Why can't you choose happiness?
Because
Clara struggled for words.
she's all I have. Because our mother died bringing me into this world. And Evelyn's been paying for that ever since. I can't abandon her.
James was quiet, his hand still steady on her waist. Finally, he nodded. I understand a duty. Clara, God knows I do, but promise me something.
What?
Promise me that someday, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next month, but someday, you'll choose yourself. You'll take that ride to the horizon.
Clara felt tears prick her eyes. And if I do, will you be there?
If you want me. His smile was crooked, uncertain. I'm not much of a catch, but I'm yours if you'll have me. The declaration hung between them, more binding than any wedding vow. Clara knew she should deny it, should protect them both from the pain of impossible dreams. But the moon was witness to truths that daylight wouldn't allow.
I'll remember,
she whispered. When the cage gets too small, when I can't breathe for all the shoulds and musts, I'll remember this night. I'll remember there's another choice. James kissed her once more, soft and reverent, like a prayer or a promise. Then he stepped back, breaking the spell. You should go. Dawn's not far off, and you need sleep before
the wedding,
Clara finished, reality settling back on her shoulders like a lead blanket. She turned to go, then looked back. James stood in the moonlight, scarred and beautiful, and hers in every way that mattered except the ones that counted in daylight. James, yeah, thank you for seeing me, the real me. His smile was answer enough. Clara made her way back to the house, her lips still tingling, her body still humming with awakened desire. Tomorrow, Evelyn would marry Thomas Whitmore. Tomorrow, their lives would change forever. But tonight Clara had touched freedom, had tasted possibility on the lips of a scarred soldier who saw past her masks to the wild heart beneath. And that truth, that moment of perfect clarity by the creek, would sustain her through whatever darkness lay ahead. The moon sank toward the horizon as Clara slipped into bed, and she wondered if James was still standing by the water, watching the stars and planning impossible futures. The thought warmed her as she finally drifted to sleep, carrying dreams of scarred hands and gentle kisses into the last free night of her life. The wedding day dawned clear and merciless, not a cloud to soften the harsh light that would witness Evelyn's sacrifice. Clara helped her sister into the ivory gown, her fingers trembling as she fastened each tiny button. Through the window, she could see townspeople already gathering at the small church, their Sunday best wilting in the heat. You're quiet, Evelyn observed, studying Clara's reflection in the mirror. It's your day. I didn't want to. Clara struggled for words that wouldn't betray her midnight encounter by the creek.
To what? Tell me this is a mistake.
Evelyn's laugh was brittle.
I know what I'm doing. Clara, I've always known.
Before Clara could respond, the sound of horses thundering into town made them both turn to the window. A dust cloud rose from the main street, and through it emerged riders Clara recognized with a chill, the Blackhorn Gang. She'd heard whispers of them in town, men who took what they wanted and left destruction in their wake. Stay here, Evelyn commanded, but Clara was already following her sister downstairs. They emerged to find chaos. The Blackhorn Gang, 8 men strong, had positioned themselves around the church. Their leader, a man with dead eyes and a scarred cheek, sat his horse like a king surveying his domain. Heard there was a wedding today, Blackhorn called out, his voice carrying across the square. Thought we'd join the celebration, maybe kiss the bride. His men laughed, an ugly sound that made Clara's skin crawl. Thomas Whitmore stood on the church steps, his face purple with rage. You have no business here. I'll have the marshal. The marshal's 3 towns over, Blackhorn interrupted. And we'll be long gone before he arrives. Just want to pay our respects to the happy couple. Maybe take a donation for our charitable works. Clara scanned the crowd. Looking for James, she found him near the livery stable, his hand resting on his gun, eyes calculating distances and odds. Their eyes met across the square, and she saw him shake his head slightly. Don't draw attention to yourself. But Whitmore, used to his money solving all problems, couldn't read the danger. I'll not be robbed on my wedding day. Men, drive these scoundrels off. What followed happened almost too fast to follow. Whitmore's men, soft from easy living, reached for their weapons. Blackhorn's gang, hardened by violence, were faster. Gunfire erupted, sending wedding guests screaming for cover. Clara grabbed Evelyn, pulling her behind a water trough as bullets whined overhead. Through the chaos, she saw James moving with deadly purpose, his gun speaking with precise authority. He wasn't shooting wild like the others. Every shot had purpose, covering fleeing townspeople, keeping Blackhorn's men from advancing on the church where women and children had taken shelter. Then she smelled smoke. "The church!" someone screamed. "They've set fire to the church!" Black smoke poured from the windows where guests huddled. Clara could hear children crying, could see flames beginning to lick at the wooden structure. Without thinking, she broke from cover, running toward the burning building. "Clara, no!" Evelyn's scream followed her, but Clara didn't stop. She burst through the doors to find chaos. Smoke filled the air, and panicked guests pushed toward the exit. In the corner, she spotted the Johnson children, separated from their mother, crying as smoke filled their lungs. Clara didn't hesitate. She scooped up the youngest, a girl of maybe 4, and grabbed the older boy's hand. "Hold on tight." She guided them through the smoke, eyes streaming, lungs burning. Just as her strength began to fail, strong arms took the children from her. James, appearing like salvation through the haze. "Get out!" he shouted, passing the children to their sobbing mother. "I'll get the others." Clara shook her head, coughing. "Mrs. Patterson, she's in the back pew. Her chair." She didn't need to finish. James understood. The elderly woman couldn't walk without help. Together they fought through the smoke, finding Mrs. Patterson overcome by fumes. James lifted her easily, and Clara guided them back toward the door. They emerged into daylight to find the battle still raging, but the fire had changed things. Even hardened outlaws knew the unspoken code. You didn't trap women and children in burning buildings. Some of Blackhorn's own men were pulling back, uncomfortable with what their raid had become. "Enough." The voice that roared across the square belonged to James, but it carried an authority Clara had never heard before. He stood on the church steps. Mrs. Patterson safely delivered to her family, his gun trained on Blackhorn. "You've had your fun. Take what you came for and go." Blackhorn studied him with new interest. Well, Whitmore hired himself some real talent. "What's your name?" "Friend." "Nobody you'd know," James replied evenly. "Just a man who's seen enough churches burn. Take the money and ride out, or stay and see how many of your men I can take with me to hell." Something in his voice, in his stance, made even hardened killers pause. Clara realized she was seeing the soldier James had been, the man who'd survived battles that had broken lesser men. Blackhorn must have seen it too. He gestured to his men, who'd already liberated the cash box from the church. Another time, then, his eyes found Clara, still coughing from smoke. "Pretty little thing. Be a shame if something happened to her." James shifted slightly, putting himself between Clara and the outlaw's gaze. "Yes, it would be a shame. The kind of shame that would bring the kind of trouble you don't want." For a long moment, violence hung in the air like smoke. Then Blackhorn laughed, spurring his horse. "Until the next time, soldier boy." The gang thundered out of town, leaving destruction in their wake. The church still burned, though bucket brigades were already forming. 2 of Whitmore's men lay wounded, and the wedding that was meant to save the Carter family was in ruins.
Clara found Evelyn standing alone in the street, her wedding dress smudged with soot, staring at the burning church. Thomas Whitmore was nowhere to be seen. Evelyn Clara touched her sister's arm gently. He ran. Evelyn's voice was distant, shocked. When the shooting started, Thomas ran, left everyone to burn. She turned to Clara, and her eyes held a clarity that had been missing for weeks. His men tried to protect him, but he just ran. Clara pulled her sister into an embrace, feeling Evelyn shake with suppressed sobs. Over her shoulder, she saw James organizing the firefighting efforts, taking charge with natural authority. Men who'd dismissed him as a mere horse trainer now followed his orders without question. The fire was controlled before it could spread to other buildings, though the church was a total loss. As the sun reached its zenith, the would-be wedding guests stood in scattered groups, processing what had happened. Several approached James, shaking his hand, thanking him for their lives. But Clara noticed how he kept scanning the horizon, worried Blackhorn might return. Miss Carter. Thomas Whitmore had reappeared, his fine suit disheveled but intact. "Evelyn, my dear, are you hurt?" Evelyn straightened in Clara's arms, turning to face her would-be husband. "Where were you?" "Thomas. I went to secure reinforcements. To protect—" "You ran." Evelyn's voice cut like glass. "You left children to burn while you saved yourself." Whitmore's face flushed. "How dare you? I am Thomas Whitmore. I don't engage in street brawls like some common—" "Like James," Clara interrupted, finding her voice. "The man who saved half the town while you hid." Whitmore's eyes narrowed. "Mind your tongue, girl. You're speaking to your future brother-in-law." "No." Evelyn stepped forward, pulling off her engagement ring. "She's not, because there won't be a wedding. Not today. Not ever. You can't break our engagement, the contracts. Burned with the church," Evelyn said simply, "along with my illusions about what kind of man you are." Whitmore's mask of civility finally slipped. "You'll regret this. Your debts will come due, and I'll make sure no one in 3 counties will lend to you. You'll lose everything." "Maybe." Evelyn's chin lifted. "But I'll keep my soul. That's worth more than your money." For a moment, Clara thought Whitmore might strike Evelyn. Then James was there, moving with that dangerous grace, positioning himself between the sisters and the furious man. "The lady's made her choice," James said quietly. "Best if you respect it." "And what are you to involve yourself, just hired help, a nobody?" "Today, I'm the man suggesting you leave before the good people of Dust Creek decide they've had enough of rich men who abandon them to die." James's hand rested casually on his gun. Funny how quickly a town's opinion can turn after something like this. Indeed, the surrounding townspeople were looking at Whitmore with expressions that ranged from disgust to outright hostility. He'd shown his true colors, and Dust Creek had a long memory. Whitmore backed toward his carriage, but couldn't resist a final threat. "This isn't over. You've made an enemy today. All of you." "Get in line," James muttered, watching as Whitmore's carriage rolled away. The square began to empty as people headed home to process the day's events. Clara stood with Evelyn, both of them staring at the smoldering ruins of the church. "What have I done?" Evelyn whispered. "The debts, the farm. Clara, I've ruined us." "No." Clara gripped her sister's hands. "You saved us from something worse than poverty." James approached carefully, hat in hand. "Miss Evelyn, I'm sorry about your wedding." Evelyn looked at him, really looked at him, perhaps for the first time. Are you glad I've finally seen what you tried to warn me about?" "I'm glad you're safe," James said simply. "Both of you. The rest, well, there's always a way forward if folks are willing to work for it." "Easy for you to say." Evelyn said, but without heat. You can leave whenever you choose. We're trapped here with debts we can't pay. James glanced at Clara, something passing between them. Maybe, maybe not. I've got some money saved, and I know men who might invest in a horse ranch, if it was run proper. Why would you help us? Evelyn's eyes narrowed with suspicion. Because it's right, James said, but his eyes were on Clara. Because good people shouldn't suffer for choosing courage over comfort. Evelyn looked between them, and Clara saw understanding dawn in her sister's eyes. I see. Evelyn, Clara began, but her sister raised a hand. Not today. Today I just want to go home, wash the smoke from my hair, and figure out how to save our farm without selling my soul. She touched Clara's cheek gently. We'll talk about the rest later. About choices and chances and men who run into burning buildings. She walked away, her ruined wedding dress dragging in the dust. Clara stood with James in the empty square, smoke still rising from the church ruins. You were incredible today, she said softly. I saw who you really are. Not the drifter, not the hired hand, the hero. James shook his head. No heroes, just a man doing what needed doing. He looked at her, concern creasing his features. You could have been killed, running into that fire. So could you. That's different. Why? Because you're a man. Because you've faced death before. Clara stepped closer. I told you last night, don't decide what I can handle. Clara. Her name was a prayer on his lips. Everything's changed now. Whitmore won't forget this slight. The Blackhorn gang knows Dust Creek is vulnerable. Your sister's broken her engagement. The troubles are just beginning. I know. Clara met his eyes steadily. That's why I need you to stay. Help us, not as hired help, but as something more. And what would that be, exactly? Clara thought of the smoking church, of her sister's courage, of the way the world could change in a single morning. I don't know yet, but I think we have time to figure it out. James smiled then, that rare, transformative expression. Yes, I think we do. As they walked back toward the Carter farm, smoke still rising behind them, Clara felt something fundamental shift. The old order was burning away with the church. What would rise from the ashes remained to be seen. But for the first time in her life, she had a say in building it. The days following the failed wedding passed in a blur of work and worry. Without Whitmore's money, the Carter farm faced foreclosure within the month. Evelyn threw herself into the account books with desperate energy, while Clara tended the house and tried not to think about how James's presence seemed to fill every corner of her world. A week after the church burned, Clara found herself alone by the evening fire. Evelyn had retired early, exhausted from another day of fruitless negotiations with the bank. The night was warm. Stars scattered across the sky like spilled salt, and Clara couldn't bear the confines of the house. She was banking the coals when she heard his approach, that particular rhythm of boot steps she'd come to know by heart. Can't sleep, James emerged from the shadows, moving with his habitual quiet grace. Numbers running through my head, Clara admitted. Debts and dates and the sound of the banker's voice when he said we had 3 weeks. James settled on a log across from her, the fire painting gold across his features. I meant what I said. I have money saved. Not enough to clear everything, but... We can't take your money, James. Why not? Because... Clara struggled for words that wouldn't reveal too much. Because it wouldn't be right. You've worked for that money. Bled for it. And now I choose to spend it on something worthwhile. His eyes found hers across the flames. Unless you're saying the Carter farm isn't worth saving. That's not what I'm saying. Then what are you saying, Clara? The challenge in his voice made her pulse quicken. Ever since their encounter by the creek, they'd been dancing around each other, careful and proper in daylight, though she felt the weight of his gaze whenever their paths crossed. I'm saying we can't be indebted to you. It would change things. Things have already changed. James stood, moving around the fire until he was close enough for her to smell leather and soap and that essence that was uniquely him. Your sister broke her engagement. Whitmore's sworn vengeance. The town's on edge waiting for Blackhorn to return. Pretending we can go back to how things were is just foolishness. And what do you suggest instead? James was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that made Clara's breath catch. Marry me. The words hung in the air like sparks, bright and dangerous. What? Clara's voice came out as barely a whisper. You heard me. He turned to face her fully, and the intensity in his eyes made her knees weak. Marry me. We combine resources. Save the farm. I've got connections back east who'd invest in a proper horse breeding operation. Your sister keeps her home. You get your freedom, and maybe we build something real out of all this mess. James, you can't just propose like that, like it's a business arrangement. Can't I? He moved closer, and Clara found herself trapped between the fire and his presence. Would you prefer I court you proper afternoon teas and chaperoned walks? We don't have time for that. Clara, your world is burning down around you. So your solution is to bind yourself to me to take on our debts, our problems. My solution is to stop pretending I don't wake up thinking about you, to stop acting like I didn't already give you my heart that night by the creek. His hand came up to cup her cheek, rough and gentle at once. I'm not proposing a business arrangement. Clara, I'm proposing a life, together. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. James, you barely know me. Don't I? His thumb stroked her cheekbone. I know you race horses like you're trying to outrun the wind. I know you ran into a burning building to save children. I know you bite your lip when you're thinking hard and hum when you're happy and look at the horizon like it's calling your name. That's not... I know you're brave and wild and kind. I know you're loyal past the point of sense and that you'd sacrifice your own happiness for your sister's without thinking twice. His voice dropped lower. And I know that when I kissed you by the creek, it felt like coming home after a lifetime of wandering. Clara's eyes burned with unshed tears. You make it sound simple. It is simple. James pulled her closer until she could feel the heat of him through her dress. I love you, Clara Carter. Have from the moment I saw through that veil to the woman beneath. The question is whether you love me enough to take this chance. Love, Clara's voice broke on the word. James, love is... It's what poets write about, what happens in stories, not what happens to farm girls with debts and duties and... He silenced her with a kiss, fierce and tender at once. Clara melted into it, her hands finding his shoulders, holding on like he was the only solid thing in a spinning world. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, she saw her own wonder reflected in his eyes. Tell me that's not love, he challenged softly. Tell me you don't feel like your soul is trying to climb out of your body to meet mine. Clara couldn't lie, not with the taste of him still on her lips, not with her whole being singing from his touch. I can't tell you that. Then marry me. His forehead rested against hers. Not for the farm, not for your sister, not for any reason but this, because the thought of spending another day without the right to call you mine is killing me. James? Clara pulled back to study his face. What about your past? The things you've done, the places you've been, I don't even know your full name. Something flickered in his eyes, pain or shame or memory. James Samuel McGraw, born in Ohio, raised in Kentucky, enlisted at 17 because I thought war was glorious. Learned different at Antietam. Kept fighting because I didn't know how to stop. When it ended, I couldn't go home. Couldn't face my mother's eyes knowing what I'd become. What did you become? A killer. The word came out flat. Matter of fact. Good at it, too. The kind of good that keeps you alive when better men die. That's not the kind of son a God-fearing woman wants coming home. Clara's heart ached for the boy he'd been, the man he'd become. So you drifted. For 5 years, taking work where I could find it, trying to, I don't know, balance the scales, maybe save enough lives to make up for the ones I took. His smile was bitter. Fool's errand, but it kept me moving. Until Dust Creek. Until you. His hands framed her face with infinite tenderness. I saw you racing that mare, wild and free and alive, and I thought, maybe there's still something good in the world. Maybe there's still a chance for men like me. Clara turned her face into his palm, pressing a kiss there. There's always a chance, James, always. Then take this chance with me. His voice went rough with emotion. I'm not asking you to save me, Clara. I'm asking you to let me love you. To build something together that's bigger than both our broken pieces. The fire crackled between them, sending sparks spiraling into the darkness. Clara thought about duty and propriety and what people would say. Then she thought about the alternative, watching James leave, spending her life wondering what if, growing old in the shadow of chances not taken. Yes, she whispered. James went still. Yes. Yes, stronger now. Certain. I'll marry you, James McGraw, for better or worse, for richer or poorer. He kissed her again, deep and claiming. And Clara understood what he'd meant that night. He took her name then, not just speaking it, but claiming it, making it part of him in some fundamental way. She was Clara, but she was also his Clara now, just as he was her James. When they finally broke apart, both shaking, James pulled her down beside him on the log, keeping her close against his side. We should tell Evelyn, Clara said, though she made no move to leave his embrace. In the morning, James agreed. Tonight, just let me hold you. Let me believe this is real. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire die to embers. Clara felt the solid warmth of him, the steady beat of his heart under her hand, and marveled at how quickly everything had changed. A month ago, she'd been resigned to watching her sister marry for money while she remained the spinster sister. Now she was engaged to a man who'd seen war and death and still looked at her like she was a miracle. James. What about after we marry? After we save the farm? What then? He was quiet for a moment. What do you want, Clara, if you could have anything? Clara thought about it, really thought. I want to breed the finest horses in the territory. I want to wake up beside you every morning. I want children who inherit your courage and maybe my stubbornness. I want... She paused, almost afraid to voice it. Tell me. I want to be happy, simply, truly happy. Is that foolish? James pressed a kiss to her temple. If it is, then we're fools together, because that's all I want too. You, the horses, maybe some little ones running around causing trouble, a life worth living instead of just surviving. It sounds like a dream. Then let's make it real. He tilted her chin up to look at him. Starting tomorrow. We tell Evelyn, we post the banns, we figure out how to save this place. Together. Together, Clara echoed, liking the sound of it. The fire had died to glowing coals when they finally parted. James walked her to the house, stealing one more kiss in the shadows of the porch. Sleep well, future Mrs. McGraw, he murmured against her lips. Clara shivered at the title. Is this really happening? Real as sunrise, he promised. I'll be here in the morning to prove it. As Clara slipped into the house, she felt like she was floating. Everything had changed in the space of an evening. She'd walked out to bank a fire and ended up engaged to a man who saw her true self and loved her for it. Evelyn was waiting in the kitchen, a cup of tea cooling in front of her. She looked up as Clara entered, and her eyes widened at whatever she saw in Clara's face. Something's happened. Evelyn said it wasn't a question. Clara sank into the opposite chair. James asked me to marry him.
Evelyn was quiet for a long heartbeat. Then, and I said yes. Another silence. Clara watched her sister's face, trying to read the thoughts behind those careful eyes. Finally, Evelyn smiled, the first real smile Clara had seen from her since their parents died. Good. Good, that's all. What do you want me to say, that you're too young, that you barely know him, that people will talk? Evelyn reached across the table to take Clara's hands. I've spent 3 years trying to be our mother, making choices I thought she'd make. But you know what? Mother married father after knowing him 2 weeks because she said her heart recognized him. Maybe that's our legacy. Carter women who know their own minds and hearts. Evelyn, I've watched you this past month. Clara, watched you come alive around him in a way I've never seen, and I've watched him look at you like you hung the moon. Evelyn squeezed her hands. If anyone deserves a chance at happiness, it's you. What about you? Clara asked. What about your happiness? Evelyn's smile turned wistful. Maybe my happiness lies in different directions. In seeing you settled, in saving our home through honest work instead of selling myself, in having the freedom to choose my own path now that I'm not responsible for yours. They talked until the tea grew cold and the night grew late, planning and dreaming and, for the first time in years, hoping. When Clara finally went to bed, she felt as though she'd crossed some invisible boundary. She'd chosen love over safety, hope over certainty. Tomorrow would bring challenges, telling the town, facing Whitmore's certain fury, figuring out how to save the farm. But tonight, Clara Carter was engaged to James McGraw, and the future spread before her bright with possibility. She fell asleep with his name on her lips, and woke to find the world transformed by the simple power of yes. Word of Clara's engagement to James spread through Dust Creek like wildfire in dry grass. By noon the next day, it seemed every soul in town had an opinion about the youngest Carter girl marrying the mysterious drifter who'd saved them from the Blackhorn gang. Clara felt the weight of their stares as she walked through town with Evelyn, running errands that couldn't wait despite the gossip. Mrs. Headley, the banker's wife, actually crossed the street to avoid them, but others, like old Mrs. Patterson, whom James had carried from the burning church, stopped to offer quiet congratulations. Don't let them shame you, Mrs. Patterson said, gripping Clara's hand with surprising strength. That young man of yours is worth 10 of Thomas Whitmore. But not everyone shared that sentiment. As the sisters left the general store, they found their path blocked by 3 of Whitmore's men ranch hands who'd survived the shooting but whose loyalty had been bought and paid for. Well, well, drawled their leader, a mean-eyed man named Silas Burke. The Carter sisters heard congratulations are in order. Evelyn stepped slightly in front of Clara. Move aside, Mr. Burke. We have no quarrel with you. No, your sister caused Mr. Whitmore considerable embarrassment. Man doesn't forget something like that. Burke's eyes slid to Clara with an ugliness that made her skin crawl. Pretty little thing like you could have had a comfortable life as Whitmore's sister-in-law. Instead, you're spreading your legs for hired help. The crude words hit Clara like a slap, but before she could respond, another voice cut through the afternoon air. Apologize. James stood at the corner of the building, his stance deceptively casual. But Clara knew him well enough now to recognize the coiled danger in his stillness. Burke sneered. Was wondering when you'd show up. Playing protector already. I said apologize. To both ladies. Now. Or what you'll shoot us down in the street. Burke's hand hovered near his gun. 3 against 1 ain't good odds. Drifter. You're right. James stepped into the street, and Clara saw several townspeople scrambling for cover. Those aren't good odds. For you. Something in his voice, in the absolute certainty of it, made Burke's companions exchange nervous glances. They'd seen James in action during the raid, seen the deadly precision that spoke of long practice. So, Mr. Whitmore won't forget this insult. Burke said, but he was already backing away. You've made an enemy, McGraw. All of you have. Tell Whitmore if he has issue with me. He can face me himself. James replied evenly. Instead of sending dogs to bark at women in the street. Burke's face flushed dark red. But self-preservation won over pride. He jerked his head at his companions, and they melted back into the alley shadows. James was at Clara's side instantly, his hand gentle on her elbow. Are you hurt? No, just... Clara found herself trembling with delayed reaction. The things he said are lies from a small man's mouth. James's voice was firm. They mean nothing. They mean the whole town is talking, Evelyn said quietly. This engagement has put a target on all our backs. James met Evelyn's gaze steadily. I'm sorry for that, but I won't apologize for loving your sister, or for protecting what's mine. Yours. Evelyn's eyebrow arched. Mine to protect, mine to cherish, mine to stand beside. James looked down at Clara, and the possession in his eyes made her breath catch. If she'll have me, mine in every way that matters. They made their way back to the farm in tense silence, each lost in thought. But their respite was short-lived. As they approached the house, Clara spotted an expensive carriage in the yard, one she recognized with a sinking heart. Thomas Whitmore emerged from their front door like he owned it, his pale face twisted with barely controlled fury. Behind him stood the town banker, Mr. Headley, holding a sheaf of papers. Ah, the happy couple. Whitmore's voice dripped acid. Come to celebrate on property that won't be yours much longer. What's the meaning of this? Evelyn demanded. Headley cleared his throat nervously. I'm sorry, Miss Carter, but Mr. Whitmore has called in your father's notes. Full payment due immediately, or the bank will be forced to foreclose. Those notes aren't due for 3 weeks, Clara protested. We're not due, Whitmore corrected with vicious satisfaction. But there's a clause about moral turpitude. Your sister's broken engagement, your own scandalous behavior, consorting with drifters, causing public disturbances. The bank has the right to protect its interests. This is revenge, Evelyn said flatly. Nothing more than petty revenge because I wouldn't marry you. Call it what you like. Whitmore's cold eyes found Clara. You caused me considerable embarrassment. Girl, did you think there wouldn't be consequences? James stepped forward, and Clara saw Whitmore flinch despite himself. How much? I beg your pardon. The debt. How much to clear it? Headley consulted his papers. $850, including interest. It might as well have been $8,000. Clara saw Evelyn's shoulders slump in defeat, but James just nodded thoughtfully. I can get $600 within a week, he said. My savings plus what I'm owed for horsebreaking. Will the bank accept that as good faith payment and extend the deadline? Headley looked hopeful, but Whitmore cut him off. The bank will accept nothing less than full payment tomorrow at close of business, or I'll personally oversee the auction of this property. You can't, Clara began, but James touched her arm gently. We'll have your money, he said calmly. Every cent. Whitmore laughed, an ugly sound. You a drifting nobody with $600 to his name. A man with friends, James corrected. And unlike you, Mr. Whitmore, my friend's loyalty can't be bought, it's earned. We'll see about that. Whitmore climbed back into his carriage. Tomorrow, sunset. Don't be late. As the carriage rolled away, Headley lingered, wringing his hands. I'm sorry, Miss Carter, Miss Clara. If there was anything I could do. You could stand up to him, Evelyn said tiredly, but we both know you won't. After the bankers scurried away, they stood in the dusty yard, the weight of impossibility crushing down on them. $250, Clara said numbly. Where can we possibly find $250 by tomorrow? I'll figure something out, James said. But Clara heard the doubt beneath his confidence. No. Evelyn straightened, steel entering her spine. No more sacrifices from you, Mr. McGraw. You've already offered more than we have any right to ask. You're going to be my family, James said simply. Family takes care of each other. Then, as family, I'm telling you no. Evelyn turned to Clara. We'll pack what we can carry. Maybe the Johnsons will let us stay until we can find work. Like hell. The profanity from proper Evelyn shocked them all. I mean, forgive me, but I'm not giving up. Not yet. James studied her with new interest. What do you have in mind? I still have Mother's jewelry, a few pieces Father gave her, and... Evelyn's chin lifted. My wedding dress. It's Paris silk, barely worn. Someone might pay well for it. Evelyn, no, Clara protested. Those are all you have left of them. Then they'll serve one last purpose, saving our home. Evelyn's smile was fierce. I'll ride to Carson City. It's larger, has buyers who appreciate fine things. If I leave now, I can be back by tomorrow afternoon. That's dangerous territory, James warned, especially for a woman alone. Then I won't go alone. Evelyn looked at Clara. You'll come with me, and you, Mr. McGraw, will guard the farm. Whitmore might try something if he thinks we've abandoned it. Clara saw the wisdom in the plan, but hated being separated from James, as if reading her thoughts. He pulled her aside while Evelyn went to gather the items. I don't like this, he said quietly. Too much can go wrong. But she's right. It's our best chance. Clara gripped his hands. I'll be careful. We both will. James pulled her close, holding her like he was trying to memorize the feel of her. If anything happens to you, nothing will happen. We'll sell the jewelry, save the farm, and be back in time to watch Whitmore's face when we hand him his money. She tried to sound confident, but fear crept in at the edges. Clara. He pulled back to look at her, his gray eyes intense. If something goes wrong, if you can't make it back in time, just remember that the farm is just land. You're what matters. You and Evelyn's safe, that's all I care about. The farm is our home. Home is wherever you are. He kissed her then, deep and desperate, and Clara felt tears prick her eyes. Promise me, if it comes to choosing between the land and your safety, you choose safety. I promise, she whispered, though the words tasted like ash. They prepared quickly, saddling the horses while Evelyn wrapped their meager treasures carefully. The sun was already past its zenith. They'd have to ride hard to reach Carson City before dark. As Clara mounted Buttercup, she looked back at James standing in the yard. He raised his hand in farewell, but she could see the tension in every line of his body. He was letting them go because he had to, but every instinct screamed against it. We'll be back, she called. Before sunset tomorrow, with the money. I'll be waiting, he promised. As they rode out, Clara glanced back one more time. James stood like a sentinel, watching over what was theirs. What would be theirs, if they could survive the next day. The road to Carson City stretched ahead, dusty and uncertain, beside her. Evelyn rode with grim determination, their mother's jewelry box secured in her saddlebags. They were gambling everything on the kindness of strangers and the value of memories. But as Clara urged Buttercup to greater speed, she thought about James's words. Home is wherever you are. Maybe that was true. Maybe the land didn't matter as much as the people on it. But she'd be damned if she'd let Thomas Whitmore take it without a fight. The sun beat down mercilessly as they rode toward their last hope. Two sisters bound by blood and desperation, carrying the weight of 3 generations of dreams in worn saddlebags. Tomorrow would bring either salvation or ruin. Clara gripped the reins tighter and rode on, chasing hope across the unforgiving plains. The sun hung low and merciless over Dust Creek's main street as Clara and Evelyn thundered back into town, their horses lathered with sweat from the desperate ride. They'd gotten the money, barely. The jewelry had sold for less than hoped. But a kind merchant's wife in Carson City had paid a premium for Evelyn's wedding dress, moved by their story. $263. Enough, with James's savings, to pay the debt and save their home. But as they turned toward the bank, Clara's heart sank. A crowd had gathered in the town square, their faces grim. At the center stood Thomas Whitmore, flanked by his men, and across from him, James, Clara breathed, pulling Buttercup to a sudden stop. Her fiancé stood alone in the dusty street, his hand resting on his gun. The afternoon light cast long shadows, and Clara recognized the scene with cold dread. A showdown, the kind that left men dead and women weeping. "What's happening?" Evelyn demanded of Mrs. Patterson, who stood at the edge of the crowd. The elderly woman's face was pale. "Whitmore's been spreading poison all day. Says your man McGraw is really Jake McKenna, wanted for murder in Kansas. Says there's a bounty on his head." Clara's blood turned to ice. She looked at James, searching for denial in his stance, but found only resignation. "Called him out not 10 minutes ago." Mrs. Patterson continued, "Your man tried to walk away, but Whitmore's got men blocking every exit. Says it's a citizen's arrest, but we all know better." "He means to murder him," Evelyn said flatly. "In front of the whole town. All legal-like." Mrs. Patterson spat in the dust. "That snake knows McGraw won't draw on him, not with the law as witness. But the moment he turns his back—" Clara was off Buttercup before the woman finished speaking, pushing through the crowd. "James!" He turned at her voice, and she saw the truth in his eyes. Jake McKenna. The name fit like a shadow over the man she loved. "Clara, no!" He held up a hand to stop her approach. "Stay back." Well. Whitmore's voice oozed satisfaction. "The bride returns. Tell me, Miss Carter, did you know you were spreading your legs for a wanted killer?" "Shut your filthy mouth," Clara snarled, surprising herself with the venom in her voice. Such language from a lady. Whitmore smiled coldly. "But then, you're no lady. Are you just a farm girl who fell for a murdering drifter's lies?" "The only liar here is you," Clara shot back, but her eyes found James. Jake, pleading for truth. "My name is James McGraw," he said quietly. "Pitched for her ears alone. Has been for 5 years. But before that, yes, I was Jake McKenna." "Did you kill someone?" The words hurt to speak. "Yes." No hesitation, no excuse. "A man in Kansas, but it wasn't murder." "Of course he'd say that," Whitmore interrupted. "But the warrant says different. Dead or alive. Worth $500. His smile widened. "Enough to make up for my recent losses." Clara understood then. This wasn't about justice. It was about revenge and greed wrapped in the disguise of law. "If you want the bounty, you'll have to take me in," James said calmly. "I won't draw on you. Whitmore, not here. Not like this." "No." Whitmore's hand hovered near his gun. "Not even to save your life." "My life's not worth innocent blood. You draw on an unarmed man. That's murder. These good people won't stand for it." "Won't they?" Whitmore gestured to the crowd. "Who here wants to stand with a killer? Anyone want to risk their life for Jake McKenna?" The silence stretched painful and long. Clara saw sympathy in many faces, but fear kept them mute. They had families, lives to protect. Who would risk it all for a drifter, even one who'd saved their children from fire? "I will." Evelyn stepped forward, head high, and Clara had never loved her sister more. "And me." Mrs. Patterson hobbled into the street. "That man pulled me from a burning church. I don't care what name he wore in Kansas." "And me." Doc Morrison joined them, followed by his wife. One by one, others stepped forward. The Johnson family whose children James had saved. The minister, whose church had burned, but who'd seen James organize the firefighting. Not everyone, not even most, but enough to stand between James and Whitmore's guns. Whitmore's face purpled with rage. "You fools, he's a killer." "So are you," Clara said clearly. "The only difference is James faced his enemies head on. You hide behind hired guns and legal papers." "Why, you little—" Whitmore's hand went for his gun. Everything happened at once. James moved, faster than Clara had ever seen, putting himself between her and Whitmore. The sound of the shot was deafening, followed immediately by another. When the smoke cleared, Whitmore lay in the dust, clutching his shoulder and screaming. His gun lay several feet away where James's shot had sent it spinning. But James— "No!" Clara was at his side as he dropped to one knee, blood spreading across his shirt. Whitmore's bullet had found its mark, even as James's had disarmed the man. "I'm all right," James gritted out, but his face had gone pale. "Just caught me in the side." Doc Morrison was there immediately, hands gentle but firm. "Need to get him inside, now!" as they helped James to his feet. Clara heard horses approaching fast. Sheriff Campbell from the county seat rode in with 2 deputies, badges glinting in the late afternoon sun. "Got a telegraph about trouble," the sheriff announced, taking in the scene. "Someone want to explain why Thomas Whitmore's bleeding in the street?" "Self-defense." Judge Harrison stepped out of the crowd. Clara hadn't even known he was there. "I saw the whole thing. Sheriff—" Whitmore drew first on an unarmed man. "McGraw here only pulled iron to protect the woman." "That man's Jake McKenna," Whitmore gasped from the ground. "Wanted for murder." Sheriff Campbell studied James with sharp eyes. "That true son, you Jake McKenna." James straightened, despite the pain. "I was 5 years ago. I killed a man named Dale McKenna in Kansas. My father." He met the sheriff's gaze steadily. "He was beating my mother to death, had done it before. But that time he wasn't going to stop. So I stopped him." The crowd murmured, the story shifting their understanding. Clara gripped James's hand, feeling the truth of it in her bones. "Kansas didn't see it as defense," James continued. "Said I should have gone for help. Should have tried other ways. Maybe they were right. But I was 17 and watching my mother die, and I did what I had to do." "Then you ran," the sheriff said. "Then I ran," James agreed. "Changed my name, drifted west, tried to become someone else, someone better." Sheriff Campbell was quiet for a long moment. Then he turned to his deputies. "Take Mr. Whitmore in for attempted murder. Multiple witnesses saw him draw first on a man who'd holstered his weapon." "You can't," Whitmore shrieked. "He's wanted, there's a bounty." "In Kansas," the sheriff said mildly. "This is Nevada territory, different jurisdiction." He looked at James. "Though I'd suggest you stay out of Kansas, Mr. McGraw. Is it now?" "Yes, sir." "Good. Hate paperwork for crimes that weren't crimes." The sheriff touched his hat to Clara. "Ma'am, suggest you get your man to the docks before he bleeds through his heroics." As they helped James to Doc Morrison's office, Clara felt the weight of the crowd's eyes, but now she saw respect where there had been fear, understanding where there had been suspicion. James, her James, not Jake McKenna, had faced his past in the most public way possible and emerged, if not unscathed, at least unbowed. "The money," Evelyn said suddenly. "Clara, the bank." "We'll stay open until we conclude our business." Mr. Headley appeared, mopping his brow. "After what I've witnessed, it's the least I can do." An hour later, Thomas Whitmore's debt was paid in full, the papers signed and witnessed. The Carter farm was safe, Whitmore was in custody, and James was patched up and resting in Doc Morrison's spare room. Clara sat beside his bed as twilight painted the walls purple and gold. His hand was warm in hers, solid and real. "Jake McKenna," she said softly. His eyes opened, wary. Does it matter? You killed your father. Yes, no flinching from the truth. To save your mother. Yes. Clara studied his face, seeing new shadows in the lines of pain and old grief. What happened to her, your mother? Died anyway. Injuries were too severe, but she lived 3 more days. Got to die in a bed instead of on the kitchen floor. His voice was distant, lost in memory. She forgave me before she went, said I'd given her those 3 days of peace. And you've been running ever since? Until I found something worth standing still for. His fingers tightened on hers. I understand if you want to break our engagement. You didn't sign on for a wanted man with blood on his hands. Clara leaned forward, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that was answer enough. When she pulled back, tears streaked her cheeks. You're not that boy anymore, she said fiercely. You're James McGraw, the man who saves people from fires and faces down bullies and loves me enough to take a bullet rather than see me hurt. That's who you are. Clara, and if anyone has issue with that, she continued, they can take it up with me, because I'll be your wife within the week. James McGraw. And heaven help anyone who speaks ill of my husband. Despite everything, he smiled. Fierce little thing, aren't you? I learned from the best. She kissed him again, gentle over his injuries. Evelyn's already planning the wedding. Says we've waited long enough and the town needs something to celebrate after all this drama. And you, what do you say? Clara thought of all they'd been through, the secrets revealed. The violence survived, the truth laid bare in the street for all to see. James McGraw, nee Jake McKenna, had faced his past and chosen to stand rather than run. For her. I say yes, she whispered. To all of it, the past, the present, the future. Yes, as stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Clara sat with her wounded warrior and planned a life built on truth rather than secrets, love rather than fear. Outside. Dust Creek settled into evening, forever changed by the day's revelations. But inside, in the quiet room where healing began, 2 souls who'd found each other across violence and loss held tight to the promise of tomorrow. The boy who'd killed to save his mother and the girl who'd raced horses to feel free had chosen each other. And that choice would reshape both their worlds. The showdown was over. The real work of building a life together could finally begin. The morning sun painted the desert gold as Clara stood before the cracked mirror in her childhood room for the last time as Clara Carter. In 2 hours, she would become Clara McGraw, wife to a man who'd shed his past like a snake sheds skin, only to reclaim it in the most public way possible. Hold still, Evelyn commanded, pinning the last of the wildflowers into Clara's hair. They'd fashioned a crown of desert blooms, Indian paintbrush, prickly pear flowers, and sage, beautiful in their simplicity. The dress was their mother's, carefully preserved and altered to fit Clara's smaller frame. Not white silk like Evelyn's had been, but practical blue calico with delicate embroidery at the collar and cuffs. A dress for a rancher's wife, not a princess. Perfect, Evelyn breathed, stepping back. You look like her, like Mother. Clara touched the fabric gently. I wish she could be here. She is. Evelyn's voice was soft. In the dress, in your smile, in the way you refuse to let anyone tell you who to be. She'd be so proud. A knock at the door interrupted them. Mrs. Patterson entered, beaming. The groom's asking if his bride's gotten cold feet. Tell him I'm considering my options, Clara said with a laugh that didn't quite hide her nerves. Tell him yourself. James's voice came through the door. Man's got a right to know if he's being jilted. Bad luck to see the bride before the ceremony, Evelyn called out. Already had all the bad luck I can handle. James replied. Figure we're due for some good. Clara moved to the door, pressing her palm against the wood. I'm here. I'm ready. Are you? Been ready since the day I saw you racing that mare." His voice dropped lower. "Every dawn since then. I've watched for you. Waited for you. This is just making it official." "James McGraw, are you getting sentimental on me?" "Maybe a little. Jake McKenna never had much use for sentiment. But James McGraw, he's got a beautiful woman who loves him despite everything. Makes a man soft." 2 minutes, Evelyn warned. "Then I'm dragging my sister to the church whether you're there or not." James's laugh faded as he moved away. Clara took a deep breath, looking once more at her reflection. The girl who'd hidden behind her sister's veil was gone. In her place stood a woman who'd chosen her own path, whatever the cost. The walk to the church, rebuilt in just 2 weeks through community effort, felt both endless and too short. The whole town had turned out, lining the street despite the morning heat. Some watched with judgment still in their eyes, but most smiled, offering quiet congratulations. At the church door, Clara paused. Through the opening, she could see James at the altar, looking uncomfortable in his borrowed suit but standing tall despite the healing wound in his side. Sheriff Campbell stood beside him as witness his way of publicly blessing what might have been a manhunt. "Second thoughts?" Evelyn asked gently. "No," Clara squared her shoulders. "Just savoring the moment before everything changes." "Everything already changed." Evelyn reminded her. "This is just the celebration." The ceremony itself passed in a blur of words and promises. Clara barely heard Reverend Mills's speech about commitment and courage. All she could see was James, his gray eyes holding hers with an intensity that made the rest of the world fade away. "Do you, James McGraw, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do you part?" "I do." The words came strong and sure. "With everything I am and everything I hope to be." "And do you, Clara Carter, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" The traditional words washed over her, but Clara heard the deeper question. "Do you take this man with his scarred past and uncertain future? Do you choose love over safety, hope over fear?" "I do," she said, her voice ringing clear. "Today and every day after." "Then, by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife." Reverend Mills smiled. "You may kiss your bride, Mr. McGraw." James cupped her face with his careful hands, and Clara saw her whole future in his eyes. Not easy, perhaps, but theirs to build together. The kiss was soft, reverent, a promise sealed before God and man. As they turned to face the congregation as husband and wife, the church erupted in celebration. Even those who doubted couldn't resist the joy of the moment. Two people who'd found each other against all odds, who'd faced down violence and prejudice and emerged stronger. The reception was held in the town square, tables cobbled together and loaded with whatever food people could spare. It wasn't fancy, no champagne or 7-course meals, but it was real. Honest celebration from a community that had learned to see past surfaces. "May I have this dance, Mrs. McGraw?" James held out his hand as someone struck up a fiddle tune. "Can you dance with that wound?" "I can do anything with you beside me." He pulled her into his arms, moving carefully but with surprising grace. "Besides, Doc Morrison will skin me if I tear the stitches. Man's got a fearsome temper when his patients don't behave." They swayed together as the sun climbed higher, and Clara felt the rightness of it settle into her bones. This was where she belonged, in James's arms, in this imperfect town, building something new from the ashes of their separate pasts. "No regrets?" James asked softly. "Only one." Clara pulled back to look at him. "I wish we hadn't wasted so much time being afraid." Fear kept us alive long enough to find each other. James pointed out, "Can't regret what brought us here." As the afternoon wore on, gifts appeared, practical things for starting a household, Dishes and linens, tools and seeds. Even Mr. Headley, freed from Whitmore's influence, presented them with a ledger. "For your horse breeding business," he said. "Heard you might be expanding the Carter operation." But the most surprising gift came from an unexpected source. As the sun began its descent, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, a rider approached. Clara tensed, recognizing one of Whitmore's former men. James stepped protectively in front of her, but the man held up empty hands. "Not here for trouble," he said quickly. "Got a message from Mr. Whitmore." "He's in jail," Evelyn said coldly. "Not anymore. Judge set bail this morning. He's already left town, heading back east." The man pulled out an envelope. "Said to give you this. Said he was done with Dust Creek and everyone in it." James took the envelope carefully, as if it might bite. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a legal document. "It's a quitclaim," James said slowly. "He's signing over water rights to the Northern Passage, the ones that border your land." He told Clara, "Worth a fortune to a horse operation." "Why would he do that?" Clara couldn't hide her suspicion. The messenger shrugged. "Said something about cutting losses, man like Whitmore. He's got bigger games to play back east. Dust Creek was just a miscalculation." After the man left, they stared at the document. "It could be a trick," Evelyn warned. "Could be," James agreed. "Or could be a man deciding revenge isn't worth the effort. Either way, we'll have the sheriff verify it's legal before we trust it." "Always careful," Clara teased. "Always protecting what's mine," James corrected, pulling her close. As twilight settled over their wedding celebration, Clara looked around at the gathered faces. Her sister, finally free to choose her own path. Mrs. Patterson and Doc Morrison, dancing despite their age. The Johnson children, playing in the dust without fear. Sheriff Campbell, sharing a drink with Reverend Mills. This was her world now. Not perfect, scarred by recent violence and old prejudices, but healing, growing, becoming something better because people had chosen courage over fear, truth over comfortable lies. "Ready to go home?" James murmured in her ear. Home, the Carter Ranch, soon to be the McGraw Ranch, the place where they'd build their future, raise horses and maybe children, create something lasting from the ashes of their separate pasts. "I've been ready all my life," Clara said. "I just didn't know it until I met you." They slipped away as the stars began to appear, riding side by side toward the ranch. Behind them, the celebration continued, but ahead lay only silence and possibility. As they crested the hill that overlooked their land, James pulled up. "Look," he said softly. Clara followed his gaze and gasped. Someone, probably Evelyn, had lit lanterns along the path to the house, creating a river of light in the darkness. "Welcome home, Mrs. McGraw," James said. "Welcome home, Mr. McGraw," Clara replied. They rode down into the light, into their future, leaving the shadows of the past behind. Clara thought of that first day, when she'd hidden behind Evelyn's veil and James had seen through to her true self with one penetrating look. That moment had changed everything, set them on a path neither could have imagined. Now, as Clara McGraw, she rode beside her husband into a life of their own making. The girl who'd raced horses to feel free had found something better than escape. She'd found a partner for the journey, someone who saw her wild heart and matched it with his own. The veil was gone, the pretenses stripped away. What remained was truth, love, and the promise of dawn on new horizons. Together, they'd face whatever came, bandits or bankers, drought or plenty. Together, they were more than their separate selves could ever be. As they reached the house, James lifted her from Buttercup's back, holding her close despite his healing wound. "No more hiding," he murmured. "No more running. Just us, building something real. Just us." Clara agreed, and kissed him under the vast Nevada sky, sealing their new beginning with starlight and promises. In the distance, a coyote called to its mate, and the desert wind whispered secrets through the sage. But in James's arms, Clara had found her home at last, not a place but a person, not safety but courage shared. The story of the veiled bride and the drifter with piercing eyes had ended. The story of the McGraws, horse breeders of Dust Creek, had just begun, and somewhere in the star-drunk sky, Clara could almost hear her mother's laughter, blessing this daughter who'd chosen love over fear, truth over pretense, and forged her own path through the unforgiving beauty of the western frontier. Thank you so much for listening to this Wild West love story. I'd love to hear where you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect and discuss your thoughts about Clara and James's journey. If you enjoyed this tale of courage, redemption, and love against all odds, please subscribe to Wild West Night for more stories from the American frontier. Don't forget to like this video and hit the hype button to help this story reach more listeners who appreciate authentic Western romance. Until next time, partners, keep riding toward your own horizons.